My
Oh.
cousin's a
That's
personal
wonderful.
trainer at one of the gyms there,
Yeah?
on the base, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. We're talking about hearing. We've got several structures in our ears. We have the outer ear, which is the ear canal, the pinna, the part you can see, and the inner, the portion that goes to your eardrum. That's your outer ear. When we get to the middle ear, however, it's fluid-filled chamber, and it's the three ossicles bones. Ossicles just means small bone. It's Latin for small bone, ossicles. So there's three of them, and then the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube, of course, if you've ever been up,
What gives damage in tinnitus?
damage.
In tinnitus?
Oh, tinnitus,
What part?
yeah, tinnitus is.
It could be anything, huh?
Well, we're going to talk about some of the things that do mess up your, yeah, you've got tinnitus. My tinnitus is just god awful. My ears ring constantly. What causes tinnitus?
Explosions?
Well, yeah, explosions. Explosions, exactly. Well, they're not exactly sure, and there's lots of different reasons. One of them, it can be that you take aspirin. If you take aspirin, it leads to tinnitus, as sad as that is.
Really?
Yeah. Both my wife and I have tinnitus. I don't know any military, any vet that doesn't have tinnitus. Tinnitus, yeah.
Supply surgeons.
I don't know.
At least in my company.
Well, I don't know.
But
If you ever had to fire a rifle, then potentially you have tinnitus. If you were ever in an explosion, you probably have tinnitus. If you've ever lost your hearing and then it came back, it came back with ringing in your ears that has never gone away.
Mine just sounds like,
Mine is just a constant ringing. When I was in the service, well, of course, I was in the laboratory and we spun down things in the centrifuge, and the thing was going like all the time. So it was just this constant whining. And so I had hearing loss, and I also had tinnitus, which does look like tinnitus, but that means it's an infection. It's just a loud noise. It won't go away. So this is the part of your middle ear, these three bones, the eustachian tube, and this fluid-filled chamber. So if you get an inner ear infection, otitis media, infection of the middle ear, this portion will become infected, and of course it will put pressure on the eardrum. And sometimes it will burst the eardrum in order for the fluid to get out, because of course we're creating pus in there, and that's excessive liquid. As I said last time, American Indians tend to have a lot of otitis media. And the reason is because your middle ear is a different shape than other people. So for that reason, we see a lot of inner ear infections, especially among the Northern Plains tribes. I don't know about here, because it's your weather is different than it is up there. It's really wet up there. It's really cold up there. So in the wintertime, kids start with an infection in October, and it doesn't relieve itself until March. It's pretty bad, because one of the problems is it's very difficult to determine what the bacteria is, so you can't treat it properly. I mean, if it's a gram-positive bacteria, you have to treat it one way. If it's a gram-negative, you have to treat it another way. So really the best way to do this is to poke a hole in the eardrum and draw out some of the fluid to culture it, to find out what it is, to make sure that you get rid of it. But of course, doctors don't like to do that, because unless they make a clean hole, it won't heal properly, and now we've got a hearing loss. So this is one of those problems that is a continual problem that is really difficult to fix. All they can do is throw usually broad spectrum antibiotics at somebody, The more antibiotics you throw at people, the more likely that the bacteria are going to develop an immunity to the problem, or to the antibiotic. And this is what used to happen in the old days. If I ever got an infection, an ear infection or whatever, they would shoot me up with penicillin. And so every time I had a cold, they shot me up with penicillin, just to make sure that I didn't develop pneumonia. It's really a tragic problem because we made so many bacteria resistant to penicillin, including gonorrhea, of course. As stupid as that is. So while we were in Vietnam, and you don't even think about this stuff until you're 25 years old and checking men for gonorrhea, but in Vietnam we had penicillin-resistant gonorrhea. Now that, you can just treat them with another antibiotic, right? No, because penicillin was the only stuff that worked. So we had gonorrhea that we couldn't cure. Whoops, what do you do with them? What do you do with a soldier with gonorrhea that you can't cure?
Tell them to use that and go fight.
Well, I guess that's one way to do it. They were fairly non-functional, and of course they had gonorrhea, so they couldn't have sex, and they couldn't urinate, which was a problem. So you'd have to catheterize these individuals to get them to urinate. What do you do with them? What would you do with them?
What would I do with them?
Sure, you're military. What are you going to do with these GIs that had intercourse with the wrong?
First I call them dumbass. Okay?
That's usually first words out of your mouth.
I don't know, I don't know the medicines of that, because they just gave us what we call razor candy, ibuprofen, gave it out like freaking.
Sure, that's not gonna work. We
I
didn't
don't
even
really
have
know.
ibuprofen back then. All we had was aspirin and Tylenol.
Maybe, morphine? I think they had morphine back then.
What do you do with them? We sent them to the Philippines, and we put them on an isolated base in the Philippines. That's all we could do with them.
How long would it last?
Sometimes they died.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn. Oh.
Yeah, sometimes they die. Some of your MIAs from Vietnam were these perpetual medical problems. We couldn't send it back to the States. Could you? You want this guy having sex with your sister? If he's got penicillin-resistant gonorrhea that you can't cure? No, you don't.
Just isolate and try to
We quarantined them.
do what you can, I guess.
But see, we couldn't tell anybody that they were there. They were quarantined, we had to quarantine them.
Did they get full honors?
Full honors. Well, they were MIAs. First,
You after a certain number of years, they just.
well, usually if yeah, they usually die. But,
My head sucks.
yeah, it does suck. This is one of the problems that you guys never had to run into, but I ran into them all the time.
Because most of, well, I don't know, in Iraq they don't have their face covered, but they have their face covered because they go, Afghanistan, they go to the old Islamic rules. They have their face covered and everything, but suicide bombers and all that, you don't know, so you're just always head on the swivel.
Exactly. Okay, so the tympanic membrane touches the malleus, which is another word for hammer. It's Latin for hammer, which vibrates the incus, which is Latin for anvil, which in turn vibrates the stapes, which is Latin for stirrup. These are the bones of the ossicles, and as you can see, they look like a hammer, anvil, and a stirrup, especially the stirrup bone. The ossicles are controlled by the tensors tympani, attached to the malleus and eardrum, And this stapedius is attached to the stapes. So these are the muscles that control the ossicles. The muscles of the middle ear contract and prevent the ossicles from being too sensitive to sound. If you like we were saying before, if you've ever been in an explosion, one of the first things that happens to you is you go deaf. And the reason you go deaf is because these bones, all the muscles have pulled these bones away. Because otherwise they will destroy, it'll destroy the ear, your inner ear. And we can't let, I mean, the body, human body wants to stay whole. It doesn't want to be destroyed. So the first thing that happens is you go deaf because all of these muscles have pulled away. And then eventually, of course, you'll regain your hearing as soon as your ear doesn't think that there's any danger of another explosion. Sometimes it takes minutes. Sometimes it takes days for your hearing to come back. The stapes of the middle ear vibrates against the oval window of the inner ear. The inner ear will convert the mechanical energy of the sound wave into an electrical impulse that will be read as sound in the brain. So we're listening to vibrations. The auditory portion of the inner ear is called the cochlea, which is Greek for snail. The cochlea is embedded, and you can see, as you can see, it looks like a snail. The cochlea is embedded deep into the temporal bone and is about the size of a pea. Unrolled, the cochlea is about 1.5 inches long. So this thing, if you roll it out, it's not very big. Still not very big. The oval window opens to the base of the cochlea, and the length of the cochlea contains 3 non-compressible fluid-filled parallel canals: the tympanic canal, the vestibular canal, and the middle canal. And I'll show you that's what they look like. These are fluid-filled chambers. Vibrations. They're trying to pick up vibrations so that you can hear very small sounds. Very little vibration will allow you to hear this. Now, if you've got, a funny thing about, and this isn't that funny, but if you've got tinnitus, you can still hear fairly well. As weird as that sounds, despite the fact you've got this god-awful ringing in your ears, or in your case, it's a thumping sound in your ear all the time, you can still hear pretty well.
Almost sounds like I'm underwater,
Oh, okay.
but it's,
Have you ever had an inner ear infection?
yeah. I
Okay.
used to have it real bad when I was little too.
God.
So on top of me
You feel.
being prone to freaking ear infections,
Right.
then I got this crap with the military.
It's probably your native ancestry that made you susceptible to ear infections because of this different shape of your ear canal. As weird as that is. Oh, wait a minute, I'm not done with that. The basilar membrane separates the tympanic canal and the middle canal.
The basilar membrane?
Yeah,
Where is
that's it right there.
the middle part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basilar membrane. Within the middle canal, the membrane vibrates in response to sound. So we're looking for vibration. What picks up vibration better than water does? So it's all fluid filled. Within the middle canal and on top of the basilar membrane is the organ of corti. And this is the membrane right here, but this is the organ of corti. And that's the portion that will be picking up the sound waves, that will detect the sound waves and tell you what's happening. That's the portion that changes all that. I was in the airport in, where was I? Albuquerque. And I sat down beside this older gentleman. He was 87 years old. And we started conversing, and it turned out that he had a cochlear implant. So he had one of those things a snail on the back of his head, which went into his ear canal.
Oh, the wire?
Yeah, the
Yeah, a
wire.
couple guys did have that too.
Yeah.
This looks like a cyborg or something.
Yeah, I know, it's weird.
When you have
He was-
when you have that just say on one side of your
Right.
head, does it help both sides?
Well, the one side is okay, the other side has this, has the cochlear.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, so I was talking to him in his good ear.
Yeah.
He had a good ear and a bad ear.
Okay, I was thinking something.
And I couldn't even see it. I had this long conversation with him. And then at some point, he turned around and said, oh, I've got a cochlear implant. I can't remember what we were talking about. But he showed me his cochlear implant, which was a little weird. Here I've got, yeah, I'm a cyborg. I've got this thing stuck in my head. The organ of Corti contains the sensory cells of the ear, and of course, the organ of Corti is what has happened with this individual. He's lost his hearing portion, and that therefore he's got this interesting cochlear implant that's stuck into his skull. There are 4 rows of sensory cells. One row of about 3,500 flask-shaped inner hair cells. 3 rows of cylinder-shaped outer hair cells of 4,000 cells each. Now, if you have any hearing loss due to whatever, my hearing loss is due to those damn centrifuges, helicopters, being on C-130s, C-47s. I flew in a fighter one time for no reason. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Because all he wanted to do was make me puke. You know how pilots are. They're idiots, and they like to make you vomit.
That sounds fun though.
And that's what they look like. No, it's not. It's not fun at all. You can't see anything. I mean, all you're doing is moving. It's kind of like being in I don't know. It's like being in a covered roller coaster is what it's like. All you can see is
down, go all the way up.
Yeah, that's fun. I love roller coasters.
The covered roller coaster where you can't see anything.
Once you hit a couple G's, man, this is all blood.
I don't know. I would like to try it.
Next time somebody wants to give me a ride, I'll let you have it. Each hair cell has 50 to 200 stiff hairs called stereocilia or cilia, and you can actually see, well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The cilia of the outer hair cells extend into the indentations of the tectoral membrane that covers the organ of Corti, and that gives the organ of Corti its information. Auditory nerve cell fibers contact the base of the inner hair cells. I knew I was going to have problems with this. There you go. That's what it looks like. 90 to 95% of the afferent neurons are connected to the inner hair cells. Each inner hair cell is associated with 16 to 20 auditory nerve fibers. The afferent nerve fibers run to the cochlear nucleus of the brainstem. The outer hair cell is associated with modulating acoustic stimulation by lengthening and shortening to receive different frequencies. So this is how we can tell pitch. This is how we can understand different frequencies of sound, is by this thing lengthening and shortening. As the stapes moves, it causes movement in the fluid of the vestibular canal. Different frequencies of sound cause vibrations that stimulate different areas of the basilar membrane. Higher frequencies down near the window, lower frequencies farther away. And this is one of the reasons why if you lose your hearing, you usually lose your hearing at the higher frequencies. I do have a hearing loss. My hearing loss is at a select frequency. It's at the same damn frequency as all those damn centrifuges. It was fairly high-pitched. Jet engines are fairly high-pitched. And for that reason, of course, I can't hear at select frequencies. Now, unfortunately, that frequency is right about at the female voice level, which is the only excuse that I have that I can think of. So as long as the individual has a relatively deep voice, I'm fine. I can hear them without any problems at all. But if they have a squeaky little Betty Boop voice, I can't hear them. I had a student one time. This is what I was teaching on a military base, and on an Air Force base, and there was one of my students who was pregnant, and as she got more and more pregnant, her voice got higher and higher and higher. As weird as that is, a little bitty tiny thing, pregnant with a little boy, and I was teaching human growth and development, And so I'm going through stuff, and and she didn't agree with me with a lot of things because she was really religious. She was from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Anyway, so anytime I'd say something negative about religion, or if it didn't fit in her mindset, then she would say something. Well, you know, she was just trying to harass me, but half the time I couldn't hear a word that she said. So what she started doing was she started talking, and she was hiding behind somebody, so I couldn't see her mouth move.
Yeah.
And of course, I couldn't hear anything that she was saying. And so sometimes the class would just burst out laughing, and I had no idea what was going on. It was just really bizarre. She finally had her baby during class, or not during class, but while she was in class, while she was...
During the...
Anyway, yeah, she was not in class when she had the baby. Anyway, but so she missed like a week of school, then she came back, and she was depressed. She was suffering from postpartum depression. And she wrote this god-awful poem and left it on her seat about wanting to kill her baby, which is postpartum psychosis. It's not that uncommon. It does happen. So she had a really good friend, another female military person, and I told her that, you know, maybe you need to look into this, maybe there's something wrong. And of course, as soon as I did that, she turned me in for, you know, disclosing information. It was really kind of stupid. She claimed she didn't write the poem. I still have the poem somewhere. It was horrible. It was really horrible. She wanted to boil the baby and not in oil, of course, but she just wanted to boil the baby and split it open and spread its insides all over the place. It was just horrible. It was hepaphretic. It was just really bizarre. And so the other lady turned her into the psychiatric people at the hospital, and she had postpartum depression to the point of postpartum psychosis. So they started her on Zoloft. Boy, talk about a changed personality. She just, I mean, like within a couple days, she was a jolly person again. It was just the most bizarre thing in the world. Zoloft, of course, Zoloft's not supposed to work. It's supposed to take about 6 weeks for it to work, but this kicked in really fast, which was kind of nice. Anyway, she didn't kill her baby. And she did pass the class, if I remember correctly. She got a C, I think. She wasn't a very good student. And it was my fault.
Well, you're gonna hear her anyway, so...
I couldn't hear her anyway, exactly. Well, I could hear her at the beginning of the semester, but then as she got more and more pregnant, her voice just got higher and higher and higher, and I couldn't hear a word she said.
That's weird.
Which is really bizarre. Okay, the tips of the cilia of each hair are connected with a narrow thread called tip links. Now the reality is we can see the tip links, well, not in that picture, wait a second. We can see them here. I can see them.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can see, those are tip links. It's really kind of bizarre that we can even see those. Anyway. As the cilia is moved from sound vibrations, the tip link starts a process of depolarization. Each tip link is connected to a potassium channel that, when open, depolarizes the cell. As the depolarization reaches the base of the cell, calcium channels are opened and the synaptic vesicles release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So we can hear because of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. We can remember because of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. We can move because of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is an extremely important neurotransmitter. It allows us to hear, allows us to move, and it allows us to remember things. Very important neurotransmitter. Because of the delicate mechanism, very low sounds can be detected. If you've ever been on guard duty, We've been on guard duty.
Yeah.
Okay. If you've ever been on guard duty, you're of course listening for sounds. I see really well in the dark. Light blinds me.
I used to, so many years, I was wearing MVGs.
Right.
At night when I drive, I have to wear my glasses.
Isn't that weird?
It is weird.
I can drive better in the dark than I can with my headlights on, as strange as that may seem.
I used to have like 20, but I think I had like 20,
2010?
yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I don't know, I think I'm like,
You know, that's not uncommon. I had another military friend who was, who can't drive at night anymore because he can't see at night at all. But his problem was the same as yours. They had those night vision goggles on, and he wore them. That was his duty, was at night, and so he was on duty at night, and he wasn't on duty during the day. So he slept during the day, and he wore those damn night vision goggles all the time.
just with us, we search for high profile targets.
Right.
At like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Sure, it's the best time to catch
That's
them.
the best time, yeah, and.
It's when they're
happens
asleep.
More often than, you know,
Yeah.
it's,
It gets bad, it gets really bad. Anyway, so we're detecting sounds, not seeing things. The ear actually makes its own noise, as fun as that is. Mine, of course, do. Scott's does because we have tinnitus. The cochlea makes noises in response to noises that it hears, and this is known as otoacoustic emissions. Otoacoustic emissions. Oto means ear, and acoustic means sound. So it's ear sound emissions. In some people, it produces continuous sounds known as spontaneous otoacoustic emissions, SOAEs. Now, strangely enough, the stronger the SOAEs, the better your hearing is. So the more sound that your ear makes, and my ears have always made sounds, but I can remember the moment when my ears started ringing. It's really bizarre. 2/3 of women and 1/3 of men produce SOAEs. So women hear better than men do. But they have estrogen, and estrogen helps them do like everything. It's just not fair. People who produce SOAEs tend to have more sensitive hearing than people who don't have SOAEs. So about half the male population can't hear very well. Most of these idiots drive motorcycles because then it just destroys the rest of their hearing. And they can't hear very well anyway. For those of us with really sensitive hearing, motorcycles are painful. So if you're one of those individuals that can drive a motorcycle or be around somebody driving a motorcycle, then potentially you're one of that, the half of the men that don't produce SOAEs.
So you can use these numbers.
I'm sorry?
You can use these numbers as, I guess, proof to say you don't have selective hearing.
Right. Yeah, well, of course. That's a good excuse anyway. Each afferent nerve cell feeds into the auditory nerve. Yeah, when I can't hear my wife. She claims that I'm losing my hearing. So we went in to have our hearing checked. And it turns out that her hearing is worse than mine. As weird as that is. Okay. So then she got mad at me because I wasn't listening to her. So there you go.
Oh, okay. You put yourself in that situation.
Selective hearing. Each afferent nerve cell feeds into the auditory nerve, which enters the brain in the pons in an area known as the superior olivary nucleus. This in turn delivers the message to the inferior colliculus and the medial geniculate nucleus before it enters the auditory cortex. And as you can see, this is the way it works, and this is where you do all of your hearing. You do hear differently from your left ear and your right ear. My left ear hears better than my right ear does. I know this because when I talk on the telephone, I can hear fine out of my left ear when I'm talking, but not so good out of my right ear. So I do have a hearing loss in my right ear to some extent. And it probably doesn't have, well, anyway, it has to do with, and this is how we can tell where a sound comes from. If it's stronger in the right ear than the left ear, then it comes from the right side, somewhere on the right side. As long as it's on the same level that you are. If something's above you or something's below you, you have a difficult time determining whether it's above or below you. Plus, you have a difficult time telling whether it's up there or it's over there. So that can potentially be a problem.
Like airplanes, right? Like when it flies, like a helicopter.
Right. When you hear a plane, can you look right at where the plane is? Can you find it in the sky? You can't?
No.
Oh, okay. I can. If there's a helicopter, I know exactly where that damn helicopter. I hate helicopters.
Very distinct sound.
Exactly. You can feel it in your chest. That's bizarre. Exactly. Yeah, that's a horrible, horrible sound.
And when it lands, just put your head down, those get rocks in your face.
But see, I was trained to find
Yeah,
planes.
that's what, yeah.
So whereas most people, they can find things on one plane, left, right, or in front of you or back of you, I was trained to find sounds up above. So I recognize it as up above. It's really kind of bizarre.
I mean, I can tell the sound, but I just don't.
Yeah, you can't find it. Yeah, you look around, you can't
It's
find it.
me, yeah.
Normally, it only takes me a couple seconds before I can find it. I hear it, it's right there, you know, and I look over there, and it's actually right over there, but I know exactly what direction it comes from. It's a painful thing to have. It's the helicopters that bother me more than anything. On our farm in Iowa, there's a National Guard base, and they fly Sikorskis, the two-bladed
Oh, the Chinooks?
Chinooks. Sikorsky Chinook.
Those things are cool to jump out of.
The Japanese used those helicopters as rescue helicopters. We used to live on the ocean, and they would fly out and rescue boats or whatever they were rescuing.
You could fit, I had to help one of the commanders, like, take stuff back to the plate. You could actually fit a Black Hawk on
Oh my goodness gracious.
there.
had
Yeah.
no
I mean,
idea.
it's like all the way to the head, but you could fit a Black Hawk on there.
Right.
Fix the blades, 'cause the blades go in like that,
Uh-huh.
yeah. You could
I'll be
actually,
darned, I had no idea.
uh,
Wow.
on the 47s, I'm not sure the 46, they might be a little bit smaller.
Right.
But on the Chinook 47s, you can.
See, we were only flying Hueys over in Southeast Asia, so,
Well, yeah, they're quick, they're small, doesn't weigh that much.
well, yeah, they don't weigh that much, they only carry 7 to 11 men, depending on what they've got, what they're carrying around. There are 3 forms of deafness. Conduction deafness are disorders of the outer or middle ear, preventing vibration from reaching the cochlea. Sensory neural deafness, disorders of the cochlea or the nerve fibers that conduct information to the brain. And central deafness, disorders in the brain auditory regions. Now, my friend, of course, had a cochlear implant, and it was for sensory neural deafness, and that's what took it away. He was able to hear, and he heard me fine. He seemed to hear me fine. Sensory neural deafness can be caused by many factors. There are hundreds of hereditary diseases that can cause destruction to the cochlea or the cochlear neurons. Drug-induced deafness also can affect the cochlea and its neurons. The antibiotics streptomycin and gentamicin, something that you need to remember, can damage the hair cells in the cochlea, which makes you deaf. Well, would make you deaf unless you had a cochlear implant. We try not to use this stuff anymore. I'm trying to think what, gentamicin and streptomycin are both, they're the same, they're in the same family. We used to treat urinary tract infections with gentamicin. If it was E. coli, which most urinary tract, about 70% of all urinary tract infections are E. coli. Gram-negative Is that right? Yeah, it's gram-negative. No, it's not. It's gram-positive. E. coli. It's aerobic bacteria, not important. Aspirin, use coupled with loud noises can reduce cochlear sensitivity and tinnitus. The sensation of ringing in your ears, that's what tinnitus is. I know, it looks like tinnitus, but it's not pronounced that way. It means ringing in your ears. I've never met a vet that didn't have tinnitus, now that I think about it.
I meet them all the time, pokes.
Shoot, they still had to qualify. Sensory neural deafness, the most frequent cause of sensory neural deafness is loud noises or continuous noises at the same pitch. Initially, outer hair cells are more sensitive to loud or intense noises, but eventually the entire organ of corti can be destroyed if you're not careful. Loud, sharp noises seem to be the most destructive, such as the reports of a weapon, motorcycle engines, of course, and intense music. I can't imagine those guys jumping in
I think
those.
the guys who had it the worst were 19 kilos are tankers.
They're tankers?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, can you imagine the vibration inside the tank?
Man,
Wow,
that's nuts.
that is crazy. Exactly, and then they fire the weapon. Well, they fire their gun, whatever their gun is. Well, the cochlea allows people to hear. The rest of the apparatus attached to the cochlea allows us to keep our balance. There are three parts to the vestibular system, the semicircular canals, the saccule, and the uticral. The receptors of the vestibular system are hair cells similar to the auditory system that are located throughout the semicircular canals. At the base of each of the three semicircular canals is a structure called an ampulla. An ampulla is just a widening area. So you can see all the semicircular canals. They're in at different angles. That gives you the ability to lean over and not fall over, to know exactly where you are. If you're laying on your side, you know exactly where your body is. And that's the reason for the semicircular canals. In the ampulla, the cilia of the hair cells are embedded in a gelatinous mass. Each hair is very delicate and quite precise in the kind of mechanical force that it is sensitive to. The three semicircular canals are at right angles to each other and detect angular acceleration in any direction. And of course, this is what they're trying to screw up when you're on a roller coaster. They're trying to turn you upside down. They're trying to make you, to force you to move to your right, to move to your left, to jerk your head from side to side, to turn you upside down, turn your right side up. They just try to flip you around so that you feel, I'm not sure exactly what you're supposed to feel like, but
I have that.
it's as long as it's a good time, who cares? I wouldn't go on I've been on helicopters taking evasive action, which is no fun at all, because you're sitting in yeah, I know, exactly. So you're sitting on a hard seat, and they're taking evasive action, so they're dipping to the left and dipping to the right, taking evasive action, trying to dodge RPGs or whatever they're trying to do. Anyway, I wouldn't get on a roller coaster for about 15 years.
I went on the tilt-a-whirl. It goes like that. It upset my stomach.
Oh, really?
I was like, what the heck, man? I was airborne, I got 17 jumps underneath my belt. I go on this little ride, and I'm just like,
You can't go on a tilt-a-whirl.
really, but I think I ate something bad.
Oh, that's
it. Just screwed up my stomach.
That must be it. It didn't have anything to do with your semicircular canals.
I don't know, man. They'll try to beat you up, man. I'm always in,
I know. They beat you up and then they don't care. The receptors in the saccule and the uticral respond to the static position of the head. Small bony crystals on the gelatinous membrane called otoliths increase the sensitivity of these receptors to movement. These are small bony crystals. This is actually, ours are much tinier than this. These are are crystals from a fish. But, this is what human crystals look like. They're fairly microscopic, and so they're really difficult to visualize. At the base of the hair cells in these receptors are nerve fibers connected to a similar manner, in a similar manner to that of the auditory hair cells. And of course, that tells you where you are when you're flipping around in your roller coaster, or flying in your helicopter, or in a jet plane, the individual's trying to make you vomit. If you don't vomit, he gets laughed at when he gets back. As stupid as that sounds. Pilots are idiots. And that's on tape, damn it, and that's true. They are the biggest dummies the world has ever created. The reality is, if you're driving a car, you're less likely to become carsick. If you're a rider in the back seat and you have no idea what's happening next, and you don't know that that bump is coming up, or you don't know that he's turning a right-hand turn very sharply, then you're more likely to get carsick. Most of the nerve cells, the worst place to be in an airplane is around the tail, because you get most of the movement. The best place to be is right over the wings, where you're fairly stabilized. But if you're in the tail, you never know what's going to happen. The tail bounces up and down all the time. We were in a, what do they call it, KC-135, the refueling plane. Made a flight from Alconbury to Omaha, and it was a refueling flight, and that's the free trip. You know, it's a free trip from Europe to the United States. So, but they refueled over Greenland. They were refueling all these B-52s. In the old days, we used to have planes in the air all the time, just in case of a nuclear war. So they were refueling these B-52s. Oh my God, it just kicked the back of the plane all over the place. Well, I was smart enough, despite the fact it was colder, I was smart enough to sit over the wings instead of in the back, which is a lot more comfortable in the back, until they started refueling. The tail was bouncing up and down. Because the B-52 created its own wake, well, it had not its wake, but it created air vibration. It created vibrations that went in front of it and went behind it. Well, normally you don't get close enough to the nose of a B-52 to make any difference. But in this case, of course, he had to bring his nose right up to the KC-135 to refuel, and so the tail of the plane was just kicking all over the place. The general was back there. There was a general on the flight. He threw up. Most of the nerve cells of the vestibular receptors I was reading the book the whole time, didn't even know that they were refueling. Most of the nerve cells of the vestibular receptors enter the lower level of the brainstem and synapse in a group of nuclei called the vestibular nuclei. While some of the nerve cells tie directly into the cerebellum, those that pass through the vestibular nuclei tie into various motor and muscular control areas of the brain, controlling your body, of course, so that your body knows exactly where you are. Wrestlers, of course, if they have a good vestibular perception, they become better wrestlers because they know exactly what position they're in. And sometimes if you get flipped over, you're not exactly sure what happened to you. I fell out of a helicopter one time from about 30 feet, and before I hit the ground, I did a somersault in the air. Was able to do a somersault in the air. Of course, you know, it takes what, 3 seconds? I don't know how fast. I was going pretty damn fast while you're falling. And I was able to do a complete somersault in the air and land on the right part of my body. Otherwise, I would have killed myself, or I would have been killed. Motion sickness is 30 feet is pretty high. That's 3 stories up.
Yeah, it is.
It's too high to be jumping out of anything. Motion sickness is caused by low frequency movements due to acceleration. Motion sickness is usually worse for the passenger than the driver, as I was saying before, who can brace for the movements or can control the movements that make them uncomfortable. Motion sickness can also be induced when the fluid in one ear is warmer than another. That's when the individual has an inner ear infection. That's probably what was going on. You had an infection in one of your eustachian tubes, and for that reason, of course, one side is warmer than the other. So your head keeps trying to find normal, and since one side is warmer than the other, you
Your
can't.
whole ear would be like red.
Exactly.
Your boys are like, why is it warm? I'm not.
You can't find, there's no normal, so your head just keeps spinning around. Your eyes are moving all the time anyway, but if you have an inner ear infection, your eyes are trying to find a stable position. And since one side is hotter than the other, it can't find a stable position, so your eyes will just, it's like being drunk, okay? If you've ever been drunk and you've been to the point that the bed starts spinning around, that's exactly what an inner ear infection feels like. It feels like being drunk. And that's what happens when you're drunk. All of your senses become destabilized.
Yeah.
Okay, so your head starts spinning and then you vomit. As much fun as all that is. A human sense of taste is based on survival needs. Since sugar is the energy source for all of our cells, it is important that we are able to detect sugar in our foods to ingest as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we are so addicted to sweet things. It doesn't have to be sugar per se. It can be just about anything. Over the weekend, we made cider at my house. My wife bought me a cider press for my birthday, and we made apple cider.
Oh, that's right, you did your apple picking too, right?
Right, we harvested all the rest of the apples and we made cider.
How many apples did you get?
We didn't actually count them by the bushel because we were making cider. So it doesn't really matter how many bushels we had, it was just how many gallons of cider we made. We made 12 gallons of cider over the weekend.
That's a lot of apples.
Wow.
Most of the apples were in pretty bad shape. We had a bad summer. We had a problem with Japanese beetles, Japanese beetle infestation. So it was
Japanese beetles.
Japanese beetles. They're about this big around.
Are they the bright green ones?
Yeah, exactly. That's the bright green one, and they'll eat just about anything.
Those are kind of cool, actually.
Well, they're cool looking unless they're in your apple trees. They about 5 years ago they ate. About 5 years ago they ate one of my trees. They killed my tree. So I used to have 2 huge apple trees. Now I only have 1.
What kind of apples? Red?
Red Delicious. We used to have Red Delicious, Yellow Delicious, and Granny Smith. And now, and we planted Macintosh, Yokohamas or something like that.
You have any Fuji?
Fuji's, that's what it was. Fuji's.
What are they called?
We have 1 tree of Fuji's. They're not growing very well. I'm not exactly sure why, but the Macintosh, nice, big, sweet apples. Oh, just wonderful. The problem with the Red Delicious is they have no flavor. Red Delicious apples don't taste like anything.
So they're not really delicious?
They're not really delicious. I think they gave them that name to fool people into buying them. They're nice, big, gorgeous apples.
Yeah, they are.
But they don't have any flavor. You can't make very good cider out of them. So we were mixing and matching the Granny Smiths with the Red Delicious. Anyway, we made 12 gallons of apple cider. Why am I talking about? Oh, we're talking about food. Okay. Now the whole point is that Red Delicious there's not a whole lot of sugar in Red Delicious. And that's one of the reasons why it doesn't taste as good as a Macintosh. Macintosh have tons of sugar in them. They also have tons of juice in them, which is great because you can make lots of apple cider out of it, but they're really good eating apples, Macintosh. They're like Fuji's. Except Fuji's are about half the size of a Macintosh.
Yeah, they're not that good.
Great apples.
It tastes
Potentially
good with cheese.
you've never been around Macintosh because Macintosh don't grow in California. They don't grow where it's hot, they only grow places like Indiana,
I think it
Illinois.
might grow up north.
I don't,
No, I mean like
Yeah.
Washington or Oregon.
Washington
California.
is big on Red Delicious. Red Delicious will grow anywhere, is the thing. As long as you can get enough water to them, you're probably okay. McIntyres are a special apple, and they only grow in the Midwest.
I don't know, I don't really need it, but I know California's a lot of grapes. 'Cause we have
Right.
Crap load of vineyards.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
the vineyards are like miles long, man.
but also vineyards grow where it's really sandy soil. So that may have something to do with it as well. McIntyre it's a clay apple, it grows in clay. So, anyway. And it only is harvestable for about a week, as weird as that is. Most apples will stay, you can harvest for a month.
When's the best time to start growing them?
End of September, beginning of October. But with McIntyre, you have to harvest in beginning of September. It's the first apple, and everybody loves it. Well, where they grow, everybody loves it because they're such sweet apples. If you leave them for any time at all, they turn mealy.
Ugly.
I like a nice firm apple.
Yeah.
I don't want it to pop when I bite into it. I want it to pull my teeth out when I bite into it. Anyway, okay, so we're looking for apples, we're looking for oranges, we're looking for something sweet, pawpaws, for example, or whatever. Salty and sour foods indicate to us important ion structures that help us maintain our homeostasis. So we need sugar for food, we need salt and sour foods to balance ourselves. Bitter substances warn us of toxic substances. If you've ever bitten into a pill, bite into an aspirin sometime, it has a really nasty, horrible, bitter taste. It is poison. Taste receptors are located on small projections from the surface of the tongue called papillae. Each papilla holds one or more clusters of 50 to 150 cells. Most of these cells are taste buds. And of course, there are 4 different types of taste buds. The Japanese add a 5th. The Japanese add umami, which is a nutty, meaty flavor.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
I never would have heard.
The Japanese are all weird. They're different. And if you've ever eaten Japanese food, a lot of times it doesn't taste sweet, it doesn't taste sour, it doesn't taste salty, it tastes like seaweed. I mean, who the hell eats that stuff? You like it, I know. Do you eat kale too?
Yeah, I like.
You like kale?
Yeah.
My God. You're so Japanese. They eat squid, they eat dried squid, they eat dried octopus, they eat a lot of really things that we don't eat. They put a lot of soy sauce on things. That's what sushi is. Sushi is the sauce. Really strong flavored sauces that we would find not very good. So if you go to, we have our own taste. We have what we like. We like Chinese food, we like Mexican food, we like whatever. But if we go to Japan, we may not like the food at all because that rice doesn't have flavor, and then you've got all this other stuff that meat and they don't really eat anything. The seafood or the seaweed that they eat has a really bitter taste. I think. I had a very difficult time in Japan. I like their noodles. Their noodles are good, but other than that, you wouldn't want to go out and just have a meal. My wife was in Korea, and the Koreans, of course, are kind of like the Japanese, but they have more variety of foods to eat because they're on the continent. Anyway, they eat a lot of pork, and they eat dog, and they eat all kinds of interesting things. And they'll eat the gallbladder and stuff like that. Things that don't taste good to us. I mean, have you ever had liver? Do you like liver?
Like sheep liver.
Do you eat it? You
Yeah.
like it?
Mhm.
Okay, how about kidney?
I don't think I ever had kidney.
Kidney tastes like urine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think I ever had kidney.
Well, of course it does, that's where urine comes from. It comes
Yeah,
from-
yeah, liver. Sheep liver's the only thing I probably have.
Okay, and you like it?
Yeah.
It has a, I don't know, it's hard to say, it's got a dark flavor.
I don't know how to.
It's got a
explain.
strong flavor,
Yeah, it is strong, but
yeah,
I
as
don't know.
compared to the rest of the meat.
I've always been like, I love food. Like, whenever I go places, I like to try whatever they're famous for.
Whatever
or-
poison that they're eating.
Yeah.
someplace.
I like.
What's the weirdest thing you read?
You know what? I can't think of anything right now.
I had a goat eyeball one time.
I had cactus fries.
Oh, nopales?
Yeah.
I grew up with that.
Yeah, I never had it until
Well,
like
put it
last
with
year.
eggs.
Have you ever, oh, of course you guys are Navajo, you've never eaten rattlesnake?
No, we can't say.
I-
But there is a restaurant in Mexican Hat. It's a steakhouse.
Uh-huh.
They're only open during the summer, so they're
Uh-huh.
only open from May to September.
Okay.
And they serve rattlesnake there too.
Hmm.
But they cook it separate. They keep that away from
Right.
the food that natives eat, so they grill that separate and they cook the rattlesnake
Well,
separate.
I would hope so.
Yeah, they do.
It has a,
I asked and I watched.
it has kind of a bitter taste.
Well, because we were watching, I was watching a show and I guess that was one of the top 10 steakhouse. That was like, probably like 4 years ago.
Oh,
That
wow.
was 4 years ago. They were like number 9 or number 8 or something.
Wow.
And then it's actually pretty good. It's worth,
Good steak.
it's like about $35.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
for like a 6 ounce.
Wow, that's a lot of money for a 6 ounce steak.
I know, but
Small steak.
it's really good though. I wanted to try it after I saw that episode. I forgot the name of the show that it was. I watched too many of those food truck shows. But I wanted to try it and I tried it and it was really, really good. And I didn't know they served rattlesnake there until I went there.
Do they have T-bones?
Mm-hmm.
They must cost 50 or 60 bucks.
It's really
You want some
expensive.
good steakhouse? Badlands in Gallup.
In Gallup.
Yep.
Where's Badlands?
It's kind of like on the older part of town,
Okay.
you know, where you had like all the old hotels and stuff. Yeah, it's right there, but it's kind of hidden. But I mean, it's a little pricey, but I think it's worth it.
Okay. I've got a steak place to go to. I haven't
To
had
try.
a T-bone steak in years. They're too expensive. Nobody sells them anymore. 'cause
Go
nobody
to
buys them.
Sam's Club.
Sam's Club?
Oh yeah, they are cheap there. They're,
Yeah.
well, they're
But
Less
you,
cheaper,
expensive.
yes.
but you gotta get their meat is pretty good quality.
Right.
And Safeway,
And people buy them a lot. Like
Wait a minute, where is Sam's Club? Is it in Gallup?
Farmington.
Farmington.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's up by the Walmart.
by, it's by Walmart.
On the main
Across the street
street.
I
from
never
Walmart.
go across the mountain unless I have to.
Well,
Okay.
you have to.
I have to go, if I go to Farmington.
It's worth it though. I mean, it's decently priced and stuff.
Mhm.
I'm not going across the mountain unless I have to. They make me go over there every once in a while. The taste buds are arranged in a depression that can catch fluids. And this is the deal about tasting things. If you can't break it down in water, you can't taste it. Okay. So if you put something in your mouth and it won't break down in water, it doesn't taste like anything.
Okay.
The chemical tastant enters the taste bud through the taste pores. Taste cells extend cilia into the taste pore to detect different chemicals, and of course, that's what you're tasting, is the different chemicals. Some of the sensory cells in the taste buds are pain and touch sensors that detect hot foods such as jalapenos. Taste buds only, habaneros. Taste buds only last for 10 to 14 days before being replaced. There are 3 different structures of taste buds. Fungiform, which look like mushrooms, circumvallate, which look like, it's just a depression. It looks like it's got a wall around it, rampart around, and foliate, which mean many layers. So it looks like one of your mountains around here with all the different layers. Salty taste comes from the sodium being transported across the membrane of the taste cells. The entry of sodium ions depolarizes the taste cells and activates the afferent neurons. Sour taste is usually an acidic compound that releases hydrogen ions. This hydrogen ion blocks the potassium channels. The buildup of potassium depolarizes the cell and causes the stimulation of an afferent neuron, indicating an acidic flavor. So some people eat acidic things. Some people like sour flavors and some people don't. Some people will only eat sweet things and they don't eat sour things at all. Some people don't like salt, the flavor of salt, as weird as that sounds.
Oh, I don't.
You don't like salt? Isn't that weird? My family eats just buckets of salt.
Oil just.
My daughter will take salted popcorn and she'll just bury it in salt. As weird as that sounds.
But I like hot sauce on everything, especially Valentina. That's my favorite. Lasagna, pizza.
He was never in Vietnam. In Vietnam, you had to put hot sauce in all the sea rations and K rations to give it a flavor. Sweet taste may be from slow metabotropic synaptic receptors that involve G proteins and second messengers. The mechanism is not completely known, but that's what we're looking for. We're looking for sweet. I'm drinking lemonade right now. This is fairly sour stuff. I don't drink water. Water burns my stomach. Isn't that weird?
Like just regular flat water?
Yeah.
How about sparkling water? Do you think you would do the same?
All water burns my
All of
stomach.
them? Oh, okay.
I don't know. It causes some kind of an acidic reaction in my stomach. I know. I can't eat green chilies either. I was at Laguna Burger 2 days ago. And I said, I don't want any green chilies, and the lady just about died right there on the spot.
Oh, by Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laguna Burger. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's their
they're known
specialty
for
is the
it.
green chilies. I just can't handle them. It just burns a hole right through my gut.
You have acid reflux?
I do have acid reflux. Yeah. But I can handle salt, and I can handle sour, and I can handle sweet, but I can't handle plain water. It just doesn't,
What about flavored water?
I don't know, I don't drink flavored water.
So how do you think you stay hydrated?
I drink lemonade. This is
You
lemonade.
got a lot of sugar.
There's no sugar in it at all, it's Crystal Light. That Crystal Light stuff gives it its flavor. There you go. The bitter taste mechanism is equally complex and may actually be different for each toxin. So if you bite into that aspirin or whatever the chemical is that you're putting in your mouth, you need to be really careful. Studies have been done looking at the bitter chemical phenolthiocarbamide, and they have discovered that about 1 in 4 individuals cannot taste the substance. So since there are 4 of us in the room right now, potentially one of us cannot taste this stuff, despite the fact that it is very strong. I was at a conference in Miami. Wait a minute, St. Petersburg. I was in St. Petersburg. And they had one of these taste things there. They put just a tiny, tiny bit on a piece of paper, and they had us put it in our mouths. Well, oddly, we were all psychologists. It was a psychology conference. We were all psychologists. Almost all of us tasted it. That was the weird part. I couldn't get it out of my mouth. This stuff was bad, and luckily I had a 20-ounce Coke. I just bought a 20-ounce Coke, and so I'm chug-a-lugging the Coke, trying to get rid of this flavor in my mouth, and it wouldn't go away. I couldn't get rid of it. And then we found out why. Some people are super tasters. They've got a lot of taste buds. Now the problem was, when I put that thing in my mouth, it went all over my tongue. And because it went all over my tongue, it was in every pore.
Yeah.
So what I needed to do was wash it out. But the only way I could wash it out was with liquid. And of course, the liquid I had was Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola did work, but I couldn't get it all over my tongue. And so I tasted this stuff for like 12 hours. I was tasting, and this stuff is nasty. I mean, it tastes like poison. It tastes like you just bit into an aspirin. It's really, really bad. Anyway, it turns out I'm a super taster. Damn it. Which pisses my wife off because there are certain things I won't eat, like mutton, of course, but she doesn't care. But I don't like spices. Salt and pepper is about it. You know, she wants to put basil and thyme and
Like just
rosemary.
like simple seasonings, you don't like it? Like that?
Simple seasonings, you mean
That's
salt and
like
pepper?
basil though.
Basil, I don't like it. It's
I like your food bland.
bland.
I don't know what.
You like your food bland.
Bland, that's not bland, it's got salt and pepper on it, what are you
That's
talking
bland.
about? I can't, and my son's a chef, so he's a gourmet chef, so he makes food with all this crap on it. And it doesn't taste bad, but it just sticks with me for a long, I can't eat garlic
okay,
anymore.
okay.
Can't eat what?
I can't eat garlic. I used to, eat garlic by the whatever. But I can't eat it at all. It stays with me for 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
Well, lemon pepper.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if my wife's tried that. She probably has. One time she made asparagus with all these strange chemicals on it. Shit, did she put all this shit on? I got sick. And I couldn't sleep that night. I had a doctor's appointment the next day, and I had to make myself throw up to get rid of it. I had to stick my fingers down my throat and make myself throw up to get rid of it. Because it wouldn't digest. It just sat there and ate a hole in my gut. It's nasty. Water does the same thing to me. Anyway, I'm weird, yes. Okay, so I'm an alien from another planet.
You're the blue
Obviously.
falcon.
I'm sorry?
You're the blue falcon.
The blue falcon. They have also determined that those who do not have the ability to taste the substance have fewer taste buds on their tongue, and that's what happened to me, unfortunately. I have way too many taste buds on my tongue. Umami is Japanese for good taste, maybe a fifth taste. They're the only ones that recognize it. We're kind of going, yeah, maybe it's there. It is described as a meaty or a savory flavor. Researchers have discovered that monosodium glutamate stimulates the umami taste buds. Once upon a time, if you had Chinese food 20 or 30 years ago, really good tasting stuff. But what they did, they put monosodium glutamate on Chinese food. They can't do that anymore. There's too many people in the United States that are allergic to monosodium glutamate, so they can't cook with it anymore. For that reason, Chinese food in the United States doesn't have much of a flavor. Not anymore. Once upon a time, really flavorful food. Everybody loved it, except the people that are poisoned, of course. The umami receptors detect amino acids, which is abundant in the protein of meats. Umami receptors seem to be shared with taste buds that detect sweet. So there you go. The better you can taste sweet, the better you can taste the meaty, savory, nutty flavors of umami. A study done by the National Geographic magazine showed that half the people that tried their test were able to detect all the odors that were present. Half the people that took their test. And this was tens of thousands. 1/3 of the people tested were not able to detect the sweat odor. 1 out of every 3 people did not smell sweat. So if you got in an elevator with somebody who was kind of odoriferous, kind of stinky, 1 out of every 3 people in that elevator wouldn't be able to smell them. And potentially the guy that smelled so bad was one of 3 people. Couldn't smell himself because 1 out of every 3 people don't smell sweat. 29% were not able to detect the musk smell. Musk smell is a sexual odor. The reason it's elk musk usually. Sometimes, well, it's either elk, it's some kind of ungulate anyway. That's where the musk smell comes from. It's a sexual odor, and 29% cannot detect this odor. Now this gets really interesting. Women were slightly better than men at detecting odors, and they were more sensitive to odors when they were ovulating. The ability to detect odors declined with age. Smokers tended to have a dulled sense of smell. This gets really weird. We're going to talk about sexual odors. We're going to talk about pheromones. The reality is that some people do not put off pheromones, and as you can see, a lot of people cannot detect them.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people that can't detect them. Now, why in the world would that be? Well, there are select groups of individuals who have been in arranged marriages for an extended length of time, for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Our people.
Your people.
Yes.
Japanese.
Japanese, oh yes.
The Japanese. So we have all of these people that have been in, and the Chinese to some extent, depending on what region of China it is. Then you have other individuals who have been wandering around the world looking for romance. Looking for romance. And those are mostly Europeans and Africans. And some Asians. So there are some individuals that have been in arranged marriages for an extended length of time who do not put off or detect pheromones. They haven't needed to for a really, really long time. And then there are those people like Europeans who have been doing this they have been trying to detect odors for a very, very long time. This is how they find their significant other, through smell, as weird as that sounds. Now, what do pheromones have to do with anything? How much time do I have? 7 minutes? What do pheromones have to do with anything? As it turns out, the odor that you put off, if you put off pheromones, have to do with your immune system. So if a male puts off a select odor, it tells another female that that's what his immune system structure is. If she has a flaw in her immune system, which most people do have flaws to some extent, she will be attracted to a male who corrects the flaw in her immune system. So how do they know this? Well, they did studies in Switzerland, they did studies in Philadelphia, oddly enough, where they had women smell men's sweaty t-shirts. And sometimes they discovered that the women found the men sexually attractive just by their odor. Okay, as weird as that sounds.
Yes.
It may not work with you guys, but it does work with select European populations, with almost all European populations, Germans, Swiss, Dutch, Brits, the Spanish. So all of these individuals put off pheromones. So most of the people that came over to North America, the Italians, the Eastern Europeans, they're all pheromone detecting individuals. And they have been finding individuals who correct their immune system for, this has been going on for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we start talking about pheromones, there are a lot of people that say they don't exist. And for those individuals, maybe they don't exist. I mean, we do have 1/3 of the population that can't smell body odors. They can't smell sweat. That's a lot of people if you think about it. So do pheromones actually exist? Well, I'm a European, so yeah, they exist for me. Scott's, you're Cuban, right?
Well, I'm mixed with a lot of stuff, but predominantly Navajo and Irish,
And Irish, okay.
and a lot of stuff, I don't know, mutt.
Well, we're all mutts. If we're in the United States, no. You and I are mutts. Everybody that's a pure-blooded Navajo, yeah, you're not mutts at all. You're pure-blooded Navajo, and you've been able to maintain your purity for an extended length of time. It's just the two of us that are mutts. So potentially you can detect pheromones. I know I can detect pheromones because it's happened to me over and over and over again, as curious as that sounds. So females are sensitive to pheromones, female Europeans, and probably male Europeans, because I have detected it from time to time. Did I I told you my story about the Japanese stewardesses?
Yeah.
You've heard the story of the Japanese stewardesses. Yeah, it was just bizarre that with all these cute little doll people bouncing around all over me, that I wasn't reacting to them. But as in a European, I'm not going to react to a Japanese who don't put out pheromones. Pheromones mean sexual attraction to me, because, well, I've only been around Europeans. It's really kind of weird. So in the airport, when you're in an airport and you're around other people, you're around other Europeans, it's weird. Here, everybody is Navajo, right? On this reservation, just about everybody that I come in contact with is a Navajo. It's really kind of bizarre. And then I will get on an airplane to fly to Iowa, and everybody's white and black and Hispanic. They're all putting off pheromones. It is just the most bizarre thing in the world. And so when I come in contact with them, all of a sudden my mind changes. It like shifts gears. It's just the weirdest thing in the world. It was the same way when I was in Japan. When I was around the Japanese, it's like I downshifted or something, and it was just the most bizarre thing in the world. I know, it's weird. But obviously, this has to do with odors, all right? The 29% were not able to detect the sexual odor of musk, as weird as that seems. Once upon a time, back in the 70s, early 70s, musk perfume was very, very popular. Jovan had musk, and everybody was wearing musk, which was kind of bizarre. You're wearing this sexual odor of the elk. Everybody's wandering around with this strange stuff. Odors are detected by a sheet of cells along the top of the nasal cavity called the olfactory epithelium. Each receptor cell has a long, slender apical dendrite that extends to the outermost layer of the epithelium, and this is the mucosal surface. Now, the bizarre thing is that if this area is not wet, you can't detect anything. It's just like taste. If you can't break it down as a chemical, then you do not taste anything. If there's not enough moisture in your nose, then you can't smell anything. But smell is probably the least attended to sense that we have. We never, we don't really detect smells. Your coat smells like something, your shirt smells like something. Maybe you washed it in Tide, I don't know, whatever. But everything smells, but you don't even notice it. Your breath smells like something, your lip smells like something. If you put off pheromones, your lip has a lot of pheromones on it, as weird as that may seem. So if you put off pheromones, you can lick your lip. I've got hair on mine because I forgot my razor. I left it in Iowa. My wife is sending it to me, so I'm going to have hair on my face until the mail comes. Anyway, you can lick your lip and you can actually taste your pheromones, as weird as that may seem. But, of course, you guys don't have pheromones, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm guessing Scott does, because he's a mutt. You're with him. So he probably does put off pheromones. But those of you who are now probably do not. Okay, we'll pick this up right here next time. So remember, it has to be able to break down, and the chemicals have to be able to break down in order to smell anything. If you have a cold and you have too much fluid up there, you can't smell anything.